Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the PrimateCast. The release date for today's podcast is Saturday, April the 30th, 2016. This being the 42nd in our podcast series, Climbing. And on this podcast, I'm incredibly pleased to be able to present an interview that I did about 3 weeks ago with Dr. Michael Huffman. So Mike is associate professor in the section of social systems evolution, the Department of Ecology and Social Behavior here at the Primate Research Institute of Kyoto University. And I guess you could probably say he's a pretty rare breed for many reasons, not least of which being for the fact that he started coming to Japan and working in Japan way back even in his undergraduate days, doing part of his undergraduate studies in Japan and then resuming with the graduate program at Kyoto University's Laboratory of Physical Anthropology in the Department of Zoology. And so in the interview, we kind of do a deep dive into the experiences that Mike's had both in and through Japan and how they've shaped who he is. And on the flip side of that, how who he is actually allowed him to just fit right into here in Japan and the way things were done, the way academics were done, which really just facilitated his development here. And of course, we talk about a lot of the work that he's been doing here since he's arrived. Now, Mike is probably best known in the world of primatology, not only for perhaps being one of, if not the friendliest person in primatology, but also, of course, his extensive work in self-medication in chimpanzees, especially in African great apes, and also behavioral traditions, the main example being stone handling in macaques. But I think what perhaps comes out most in the interview is Mike's humanity. And for those of you who don't know, Mike was my PhD advisor. I started back in 2007, and we don't really get into that too much, aside from alluding to it in the first few minutes of the interview. But I remember as an undergrad and graduate student back in Canada, in Calgary, thinking that, Mike's work, when I'd read it quite often, and I was really interested. He was one of the few that was kind of combining work on parasites and behavioral ecology of primates. And that was something that just really struck me. And I was trying to find ways to do that as an undergraduate student through field schools, even as I proposed that for my master's thesis. But of course, where I was, there just wasn't really any of that work going on and really no expertise in the department for that. So I kind of put it on the back burner there, but I just always wanted to get back to that. And so in the interview, Mike talks about kind of helping people out with their dreams. And it was really true for me, because when I ended up here in Japan for other purposes, while on a teaching hiatus from academics, I made a point of meeting Mike. I knew he was here. I knew about Kyoto University's Primate Research Institute. And I just came down and we talked about the possibilities. I gave a seminar, and I'll never forget it was the first time I met him, basically. We came into his office after my seminar, and we sat down at his desk, and the first thing he said after looking at me was, "So when are you going to come back?" And for me right there, it was, okay, that's it. This is not going to be if I come back. It is definitely when. So I didn't know, but it wasn't that much longer till I actually ended up here. So, and then Mike was great. So I think that the kind of guy he is, and of course the work that he was doing just was a perfect fit for me. And so I hope that, this kind of relationship we've been able to develop over the past decade plus also really comes out in the interview. And it's funny that, Chris Martin and I, when we started this podcast, Mike was supposed to be one of our very first interviews because we both really liked him, we get along, and also he does really interesting things and he's an interesting guy. And so we knew that people would want to hear from him. But it's one of those things also where, okay, he's just right next door, so we can do an interview anytime. And then anytime actually turns out to be 4 years later. So it's a bit of a shame. But the good thing is, in the interview, since we focus so much on the kind of person he is and what he likes to do, and especially mentoring students and interacting with people, we didn't talk too much about his research. So we'll definitely be able to get him back in the studio in the near future, and I'll try and hit him up on those finer points of what he's doing. But in the meantime, I think everybody will really enjoy this interview. So I'll just stop talking here. Here we go. Yeah, so as I was saying, I don't really know how to conduct a proper interview with you, since our involvement goes back quite a ways now.
When did it start? What year did you contact me?
I contacted you probably in 2004 when I was here as an English teacher. And then I think 2005, more than 10, yeah. I came here when we had the World Expo in Aichi. or something.
Really?
Kanda and I spent a couple of days there and then popped up here.
Right. Yeah.
To give a talk.
Yeah. That was when you were one of the last Mohicans with your mohawk.
I think that was a little bit later. But I mean, that was when I first came as a student in 2007. Right. Yeah. As I said, I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but JASO, the Japan Students Association or something that connects with Mombusho people when they give the scholarships. They set you up with a bit of pocket money. So I had to use that to buy a balikan shaver to get rid of that before I arrived at Kyoto University proper. To be your student.
Good idea.
Well,
to be my student and to shave off your mohawk.
Knowing you now, I mean, it probably would have been better to keep it. Or at least wouldn't have been a detriment to me, I guess, at the time. But I don't know about everybody else. Yeah. So that was kind of how I came here. But then you've been in Japan now for, 35 plus years?
37 years coming up in January.
Man.
Yeah. Came in 1978 in January.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what was how did that come about? Why was it something that you were interested in, Japan, or?
I guess I'd always had a connection with Japan, but I didn't really think of it as a motivating factor for me to come to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
My first babysitter, I think, was a Japanese woman. She was in Denver because her husband was working for Sumitomo Bank, and I must have thought she was pretty cute. I was like 4 or 5 years old.
The reason for so many poor and good decisions, I suppose.
And my first buddies outside of the house, like from kindergarten, were two Japanese American families, Dick and Gary and Richard. And, I just, always had this connection with Japanese people, but I didn't really connect it with Japan. My mind was in Africa since I was like 3 or 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
My mom would read me Curious George, and she tells me that I told her one evening when she was reading the story to me, that when I grow up, I'm going to Africa and live with chimpanzees. And it wasn't until like 23 years later, when I actually came back from my first field trip to Mohale, that she told me that I had said that when I was done. I go, wow, I'm really stubborn. I had to keep my statement from 4 years old until I did it.
Is that something that you could actually, if you think back, can remember, or is it just one of those things that your parents would have told you and you just kind of run with? I have one from my childhood. My mom always tells me that, and she repeats the story numerous times, that when I was about that age as well, it was a cold, brisk autumn day in Winnipeg, and we were walking outside. She was a university student at the time, and asked if my hand was cold, and I said, nope, warm as the inside of a whale's mouth. Not something that I could actually remember, although I wish I did.
And now, have you put your hand in a whale's mouth?
I haven't. Closest I got so far is a penguin, but
in his mouth, or
well,
you're collecting fecal samples. Maybe the other end.
It's the other end, right? Yeah. Sometimes you get back, mixed up a little bit. But so apart from living with chimps, though, I mean, you working with primates also was something that started really early.
Yeah. I went back and looked in my high school yearbook and my junior high school yearbook not too long ago. I was back visiting the folks, and people were writing Monkey Mike, hey, and in 20 years you'll be in the jungle with monkeys. I just know it, Yeah, that's where I went, via Japan. And it's very important, I think, that I went to Japan. It all happened very opportunistically at the university that I was enrolled in Colorado, Fort Lewis College. I had gotten there actually in high school through a summer ecology anthropology program. We spent 3 weeks down in Durango, Colorado, in Fort Lewis. Beautiful campus on top of a mountain, surrounded by gorgeous mountains, deserts not too far away, and a very rich indigenous culture. A number of different tribes, the Hopi, the Ute, the Apache, many in that southwest corner part of Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada. Very rich culture. And we had spent half of the time studying the people's culture and the other half studying ecology. And I said, wow, this is the place I want to spend my college years, be in the mountains with this rich environment. So it was enrolling in that university in my last year of high school that got me the ticket, the invitation to come to Japan for a study abroad program for 3 months. We'd be there for 3 months, here for 3 months, and we would get like almost a year's credit because we had really intensive courses in Japanese and in history and all kinds of things about Japan. So I said, hey, yeah, why not? So I, with it, at the same time, I was planning on going to Africa, this dream. And so I had studied German in high school for 3 years, thinking I would go to the roots of, to the home of ethology and study with people who have studied with Konrad Lorenz and those guys, and then try and work my way to Africa that way, either in wildlife biology or ethology. So I had this huge catalog of all of the possibilities of studying abroad in Europe, and arrived the same day that this one thin letter from Fort Lewis College said, you're accepted, congratulations, and by the way, we have this program where we take a group of 7 or 8 people to Japan for 6 months. You have a 3-month course, and you can spend the next 3 months summer break traveling around Japan and experiencing things. And it was like, I don't even remember opening up that big fat catalog from Europe. It was just this one-page letter from Japan was burning in my hands. And by the end of the day, I said, Mom, I don't care what it takes. I'll take another job. I'm going. I've got to go. And Mom said, well, we'll talk to your father. And I convinced him, and
there you go.
There I go.
It's interesting because Chris and I on this podcast have talked about how we feel like coming to Japan for study it's such an underutilized or underrepresented pathway for people especially from the West. Yet there are so many opportunities here as you took full advantage of and kind of changed the landscape, I think, for at least within the Primate Research Institute in Kyoto University for foreign faculty eventually ending up here.
Even for foreign students, there was when I first started, there were a few people from Africa, many people from China, but no one from the U.S., no one from Canada. If they were studying Japanese literature or haiku or something, but just for a short time. No one would think of coming to Japan for graduate school. Yeah. And I came over as an undergraduate and started undergraduate studies here as well. So, but I like to do things that no one else is, that not everyone else is doing. Right. So it seemed like the big adventure and something to take advantage of.
And at the same time, and maybe there still may not be that many people that realize it, but through Kyoto University, I mean, you had access to so many primatology field sites in Africa as well. So even today, Japan has probably the most, at least the largest percentage from any one country. Right. It runs, for example, sites on great apes.
Right, right.
It's really impressive.
Yeah. When I first got to Japan, and it was meeting Professor Kawai and Mitani, that I realized what the Japanese were doing with primates. And I said, this is why I came. All of a sudden, one day, all of the stars aligned, and I could just step from one to the next, and it went right to Japan. And the next hop was Africa, because what these guys were doing, and we connected in so many ways on individual levels, personal levels, but just to see what they were doing all around the world. I said, that burning piece of paper in my hand all of a sudden really made sense. And I've never looked back. Yeah, it's been great.
So what was that like coming in? I guess you came into the Laboratory of Human Evolution Studies in Kyoto University. I don't know if it was still called that at that time.
Then it was the Laboratory of Physical Anthropology. Professor Jiro Ikeda, a physical anthropologist, was the professor, and Professor Junichiro Itani was associate professor. And then half of the students and postdocs were studying hunter-gatherers in Africa. The Kunsang, the Mbuti, the Mbaka, a lot of hunter-gatherers, as well as pastoralists in Kenya, in northern Kenya, the Samburu, the Rendile, Turkana. So our seminars were so rich. We'd hear people studying mountain gorillas, Yamagiwa-san studying mountain gorillas, people on Yakushima studying Japanese macaques, people studying chimps, orangutan, and then this whole other world of human studies. but we were smack dab in the middle of the Faculty of Science in the Department of Zoology. I don't think there's any other place in the world that has that openness, that line of communication with all the other disciplines. And the Japanese, frankly, were doing all of these things with whatever field they were interested in. The botanists, of course, had to study about the people and how they use the plants. But Professor Mitani would always tell us, monkeys aren't their own universe. They're connected with everything else, people, plants, everything. So don't miss anything. Just take it all in and write down what you see. And the first thing he told me, and I think he's telling all of his students this, because I've heard other people say it, says, if you want to understand monkeys, you've got to be a monkey. So first, just be the monkey, And so that's what I did. I ran up to Arashiyama and slept on the mountain, and whatever they put in their mouths, I put in my mouth. And I didn't have
for better or for worse.
Nothing bad happened out of it. I was pretty hungry in those days. I didn't have a lot of money, so I would take potatoes and apples and things out of the bin that they would be feeding the provision monkeys at Arashiyama as a snack. And I'd take them to the cabin at night and fry them up. And
never got into trouble with the alpha monkeys there?
No. One of the keepers got angry, though. He said, that's monkey food. You can't take that.
Are you paying for this?
But the director said, no, that's fine. He's cool.
Special privileges for the primatologist.
Right. Yeah. He took really good care of me. Like I said, I didn't have much money. I was teaching English to make a living. And the first 6 months after I left homestay, I was staying in friends' apartments. I would rotate every day. I was a hunter-gatherer myself, basically. And I'd move from one place, wherever the food was, I'd move. And I lived out of a knapsack for about a year and finally saved money for my own apartment. But until then, I was pretty mobile.
So just jumping ahead of, because I see kind of a thread here when you talked earlier about the field school that you got offered in Durango, where you got to do things about the indigenous people and also the science, and then Kyoto University's physical anthropology lab, the primatology, but also the human studies. And then I just go ahead and say, like, what you became most known for around that time or shortly after that time was doing almost exactly the same thing. So with the whole self-medication story that emerged there. And so you were, as you just said, you were interested in the primates, also the plants, the ecology, and then the human side of things. So was that all just always there from the beginning, or how did that part of your work come about? Was it somehow planned, somehow serendipitous?
None of it was ever planned. I had all kinds of ideas and all kinds of things that I started out to do in each site, at Arashiyama and at Mahale. But the ones that have lasted as long as they have, all these projects, were based on just seeing what the animal is doing, and something that's so out of the ordinary for their normal life must be something special for them. So trying to understand what's special about it for them, and then putting that into the context of primatology, what's special about it in our discipline. Stone handling, mate choice. When I started studying mate choice, I think Fred Berkovich and I were one of the very few who were looking at that topic in wild primates. And most of the theories were all focused on males and dominant males. But in my effort to become the monkey, I would follow the females and see what they were doing. And just
wait a minute, to become the monkey and follow the females.
Japanese macaque females, I would look at what they were doing, because I'd read all the papers about male dominance and how that determined priority of access to females and all of this. But I wasn't seeing that, because I was following the females and seeing what they were doing. And you'd see these big brash alpha males come in and chase the male away or chase the female away. And then people would stop there and say, oh, yeah, that confirms the hypothesis. So it's happening the same thing in this species. But that's not how I was trained. That's not how I thought. So I followed what happened afterwards. I said, how come no one has followed what happens afterward? So those kinds of things. It's just an interest, taking it beyond what's written in the textbooks or in the papers of the day. I found something different. The stone handling as well. it just out of the blue one day, this young female Glance 6476 had a couple of rocks, and she brought them out to the middle of the feeding area. And she started playing like it was blocks, like a young kid. So I snapped a few photos and jotted it down, but I didn't see anything for another 6 months. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until 3 years, 2.5, 3 years later, when I came back again, it had already spread to 80% of the troops. So I followed that. I took this story back to Professor Mitani, and he said, keep an eye on that. Might be important. So I just dived into it, and it was kind of like a side project while I was doing the mate choice stuff. Then my first trip to Mohale, the same thing. I had this plan. I was going to study the role of aged individuals in the group, because we only had a few old age chimps, and it's been a long time since that condition was at Mohale or anywhere really. So I thought that was a good thing to look at. So I was looking at adult females and old adult females and adult males and old adult males, and trying to understand the role of adults within the group. But one day, I was with Mohammadi, a tracker and long-term member of the research team there, and saw this chimp, Chaushiku, pick up this plant that I'd never seen her eat before. And because Mohammadi is a traditional healer, he would tell me about plants. I was always interested in what the people were doing with the plants. And I had some experience in high school with shaman from the Southwest, so I was really interested in that area. And a textbook in high school was Carlos Castaneda's Journey to Exiled Land. And some wild things went on in those books. So I was interested, and I was aware of that part of traditional culture. So I guess medicinal plants were always something on my mind. But again, it was just by accident, but it seemed so intriguing and so many coincidences how it matched with what people were doing. So I ran with that, and that's been something that's been on my mind, and I've been working. That program has expanded throughout the years to many different species and everything. But there's this connection. It started with mate choice, and then stone play, and then self-medication like sex, drugs, rock and roll. It was all purely innocent and accidental.
Well, you definitely are a rock star. If nowhere else in the field of primatology, for sure.
But it's really wild how all these things happen. As a boy, I dream of writing books. I would copy down pages from an encyclopedia for high school. No, this is as a grade school student, for reports or projects. And I says, wow, someday I want to write an encyclopedia. I want to write a book. I was just intrigued by masses of information, not just getting it from someone else, but I wanted to make some. So I was always really interested in that kind of thing.
And that, it seems like you're interested in everything. And that's kind of reflected in how busy you are. And your travel schedule throughout the year. So recently we had Colin Chapman in here.
Right.
And in some ways I see a lot of kind of parallels in the stuff that, not only the stuff that you're doing, but also personalities and that. And I asked him, how he kind of manages to be that busy. And I guess I can put the same question to you. You obviously love what you're doing, which is, I think, the first thing. But how do you keep up with it? And
well, I have a lot of time to do it because I don't have a job. I haven't worked a day in my life. If this is work, man, they got to change the definition. It's too good. Well, you just always do things. I don't know. I'm interested in everything. I'm interested in people. I like to help people with a dream because so many people help me with my dreams. And I know what it's like to have a dream and not have things happen as you would like, but you just keep moving forward. And then sometimes someone comes into your life and they make things happen. They help you make this decision to go left or right on the road. And if you keep making the decisions close to your heart, then you end up being where you want to be. And that's what I keep telling younger people who come to me and say, well, I love your job. How did you get that? I want to do the same thing. And I said, well, if you want to keep at it. Don't give up. Don't let setbacks be the end of the road. So when someone approaches me with a question or something they want to do, I can feel pretty quickly if they really feel it, if that fire is burning inside, and if they're really sincere and they have a dream like I had, I still have many, then I want to help them, because I'm in a place now, in a position now where I can help people, and I wanted to use that in a positive way for the discipline, for people's lives. And in the end, it just feels good to help, to see someone else feel good, and that comes back to you, and I think it extends your life.
So I suppose in the last decade or so, you've really gotten involved in anthropology and primatology being done in a part of the world, including India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, more recently Nepal. So how did that also come about? I mean, it's kind of a long way from Africa and Japan, but well, you also often say that in a previous life you were Indian. So.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I even got the head wobble down.
For those of you listening, there it's looking pretty good.
I think, well, part of my wanderlust, my desire to go to places, again, goes back when I was in grade school. I would look at the clouds, see them moving across the sky, or I'd look at the mountains, the Rocky Mountains. I could always see from the kitchen window. I'd help my mom wash the dishes or whatever. And I could see these mountains. And I said, God, I want to stand on top of those mountains or see those clouds. Who else is seeing those somewhere else? And we had people that came in to my life in different ways at school, or visitors or whatever from other countries. And I really admired the effort that they put in to adjust to the culture and the country where I lived, where I grew up. And I wanted to do the same somewhere. But I always had this feeling that I had come from somewhere else. And before I knew what past lives were, I had, I tell my mom what I did when I was an old man. I guess my older brother and my younger brother had the same stories. When they were an old man, they did this. But I can close my eyes and still see things. I don't know where they came from. Whether we really have memories of past lives or it's just related to something that influenced us subconsciously, it doesn't matter. It's a great feeling, and it's like a vehicle for moving ahead. And by feeling a connection with people in different parts of the world, it makes the world smaller and more comfortable to move around in. But I just love people, and everyone has an interesting story, and when you meet enough people from different places, you realize that they all have so much to offer, and they have so much capacity to do different things. It's just conditions, not that have changed over history, that make it more difficult for some people than others. Where they were born makes it more difficult. And I've always, when I first came to Japan, everyone said, "Why study Japanese? No one's going to study Japanese. Only the Japanese speak that language." I said, "Well, yeah." But I learned very quickly that there's a lot of people coming to Japan who didn't speak English, but they spoke Japanese. So I could speak to a whole nother group of people in Japanese because that was a common language. As the world changes, languages gain or lose importance. But that was, I think, one of the lessons, one of the eye-openers for me, is how I changed as a person by acquiring another language. Your personality changes. And it really expands how you can look at a situation or a problem. And I think it's really important for science as well, because not all science is born in the West. Not all science is from Harvard. You talk to people in different places, and everyone has their own perspective, the cultural background, their mentors' background. All these different things come into play. And there's such a lot of things out there that we all can learn from each other. So traveling around and lecturing in these different countries and mentoring students and learning from so many people, it's I wish I could have 10 more lives in the future. This life, there's just so much to do, so much to learn.
Right. Yeah. Do you think that I mean, maybe it's kind of coming out during this interview, but do you think that having come to Japan at the young age that you were, and studying here and kind of developing in primatology here, do you think that the system, the way things were kind of done here in Kyoto at the time, I mean, that was really the second generation of Japanese primatologists, let's say. Right. So Mitani was your supervisor. Right. But do you feel like that the way that things were done here was kind of more suitable for, I don't know, just who you are or how you would like to see things done? Or
definitely, definitely. Just at that time, now I think more people think the same way. But I remember in high school, the year that I graduated, I went to the Caribbean. I was working. Well, I paid some money on this International Training Institute, International Expedition Training Institute. It's kind of like Earthwatch today. And I was able to go to this small island in the Caribbean and look at some vervet monkeys running around on the island. People from the University of Los Angeles had an ongoing study on serotonin in captive vervet monkeys, so they were doing lab work. But the money that the volunteers like myself gave them allowed us to spend time on the island and look at the monkeys in the wild. And I wanted to try and observe the monkeys there in captivity as well, to kind of combine things, to do something. So I wanted to study individual personalities and whatnot. And the guy who was looking after us, he kind of laughed and said, "Animals don't have personalities."
Right.
And I growing up with dogs and cats and all kinds of animals, I couldn't believe he was saying that. But when I came to Japan, it's like, of course they have personalities. Everyone's different. That's what we're studying. We're studying their history to understand how their social organization is. And it was just like overnight, I said, these guys got it. My head clicks in the same way. And when I met Professor Mitani, I had an appointment to talk for like 30 minutes or so. And we ended up speaking for 3 hours. And, it was just like, this is the guy I've been waiting to talk to. And, at that point, it's just, at that time in 1979, when I met him in August, I said, I'm staying in Japan. This is where my bones will be buried, or my ashes, part of them will be spread. The more places I go, the more places I put on my list for where part of me is.
So someone's going to be busy when that happens.
Right.
Just kind of going back to the research a little bit. So when I want to go to Mahale first and then come back to the Japanese macaques, and then we can start to close out. But just when the observations that led to the discovery of self-medication, I mean, that was quite a big story that broke. So what was that like was it something when you first saw it and you started putting this work together that you knew was kind of going to blow up? Or
I knew it was going to blow up the first day after I put Chaoshiku to bed. We left her where she was going to sleep that night. I couldn't sleep. Just all these things started going in my mind. But when I took the story back to my colleagues in camp, they said, "Oh no, we know the chimps eat that plant. It's not that. We know that they do this." I just was kind of dumbfounded. I said, I have to convince these guys too, and they've been looking at chimps for 30 years. But I just couldn't sleep. It was one of the easiest papers I wrote. That first paper, it wrote itself. It was like someone was talking to me. It was just so easy to write. It just, everything came together. It made sense how things should go.
And you wrote it with Mohammadi.
Right. Because without him, nothing would have happened. He's the man. He's my. I owe a big debt to him, to Professor Mitani. I could list all these people going back to when I was in kindergarten, probably. But yeah, without Mohammadi, honestly, none of this would have happened. And I worked with him for close to 20 years, and around the 10th year, he just happened to tell me that, the Watongwe also know that animals self-medicate, and we've got many medicines from watching sick animals. Mohammed, this is great, but I mean,
10 years.
Well, it's good you didn't tell me in the very beginning, and I was
Sure.
like, oh, okay, well, that's no big thing. So we had to. He made me work for the information.
Well, it probably, letting it settle in a bit made you definitely more receptive to it, I'm sure, at the time as well.
And it gave me more confidence, and it made me more humble, because the more different people around the world that I began to talk to, they all have the same kind of story. So this study on chimps actually is this, it's gotten much bigger, and it got me back to my interest in ethnomedicine and ethnopharmacology and things. And so, it's just everything I've been interested in since I was a kid, I'm still doing today. It's just amazing. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up, but I'll let that.
There's time for that, Mike. Long ways away. Sure. And then, okay, so the self-medication aside, and then coming back to the stone handling thing, that's a little bit of an interesting one, because earlier you mentioned glands. What was the number?
6476.
6476, and for everybody who doesn't really know, that's the name of a monkey in Arashiyama.
Right. Glance was her great-grandmother. Her mother was born in 64, and she was born in 76.
There you go. And so through that observation, you were able to kind of see an innovation happen. And that must have been before the idea of innovations in culture existed, really, for non-human societies, or at least it was in the very beginning stages.
Potato washing was the only example we really had. Wheat placer mining and potato washing, and then but that was like 1954 when it was first mentioned in Japan, and it wasn't until 1965 when it came out in English. But after that, there wasn't really a whole lot.
Yeah, there were the tits in Europe,
right?
The milk bottles.
Yeah.
But so it's safe to say at least that this is kind of in the pioneering stages of that kind of whole field.
And with Japanese macaques, definitely. There's been a long silence.
Right. And then now you've had students, you've had postdocs who've looked at this stone handling and have learned all kinds of things, quirky things about it.
Yeah. I've been very, very lucky to have some really, really nice collaborators. Which one of my collaborators, Charmali Nahalage from Sri Lanka, has led me to a whole nother more than 10 years now of work in Sri Lanka. It introduced me to her culture and her country and the amazing situation on that island. Just through people you find new places to do work. And Jean-Baptiste Leca came as a postdoc, I think, for about 7 years. There's just no end to stone handling. And now he's doing great stuff. He's got his own students, and he's expanding work in Bali and looking at stone handling. The three of us, we call ourselves the three monkeys. No evil, no speaking, no talking, or no hearing anything. Just work. Really a lot of fun with these guys. And we went to Bali and spent some time, and he's taken that further. Charmley and I looked at captive rhesus macaques. We went to Thailand and looked at stone handling macaques there. It's just, it goes back to some of the earliest interests, how animals learn things, social learning. Now with the stone handling, I've got some other people who I'm beginning to work with. We're again looking at natural drugs produced by the body, endorphins and things, trying to ask a different question about stone handling. What's the physiology behind it? We spent a long time looking at the mechanisms of social learning and studying this behavior for 35 years, and seeing how it's changed and accumulated over the years, the behavioral patterns and everything. But it's all really good, because you have people to work with, and they bring in new ideas, and these friendships lead to new places and new studies, different things.
And so the work in Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, you've been training students and I guess lecturing a lot too, so encouraging new students to get into the field. And the work that you're doing now, so a lot of it has to do with even identifying some primates we may not really be familiar with genetically, and also talking about conservation as well of primates in that area.
Right. This whole the work in Sri Lanka started off with trying to look at parasites for one thing, but documenting. Actually, it started just to document as many different populations on the island of macaques and the two langur species as we could, because we know so much about those species, but only from one site. Very long-term research by Wolfgang Dietes, really nice work. But that's all we know about Sri Lanka. Basically, Sri Lankan primates is from a very, very, very specific locality. And the island is so diverse, so many different habitats and everything. So Charmely wanted, to take on this task of training the next or the first generation of Sri Lankan primatologists, and that was her dream. That's what she came to me when she got a government a MEX scholarship from the Japanese government to come, and I spent like 6 months talking to her over email to figure out what she wanted to do and to find that fire burning in her belly. And when I saw it, I just said, "You've got a dream. I'll make it mine. Let's make it happen." And so, bam, Sri Lanka. It's been more than 10 years. And we're looking at phylogeography now. We've learned genetics from Professor Kawamoto, ethnoprimatology. It's just an amazing island. And through that, I've reconnected with my inner Indian, and have some really good friends and a lot of students in India that I work with, and now a student, Himani Natyal, who has just entered PRI as a visitor right now, but we're hoping that she'll come as a graduate student. And she's introduced me to the Himalayas, which again has been a dream since I was a little kid. I was really into mountain climbing and things from junior high school, and I had posters of all the Himalayas in my bedroom on the wall. And I went to bed seeing those mountains, and I woke up seeing those mountains. And last year I woke up seeing those mountains, only I was there.
What is it with Japanese primatology and these mountain expeditions into the Himalayas? So you do fit in.
Yeah, must be in the genes. I don't know.
So to kind of wrap things up then, I mean, for all the things you've already done, what's kind of on your plate now? I mean, where are you, apart from the things you just mentioned, with Charmely and Himani, and where's it all kind of heading?
Well, the next step is within the country with Japanese macaques. Like I mentioned, we want to try and non-invasively measure pleasure hormones and endorphins, as well as stress-related hormones like cortisol or testosterone, to try and look at the stone handling from another way and see how animals are coping and what they're getting from it. I've got a fantastic student from Brazil, Sayuri Takeshita, and she's introduced me. I can't say that I'm following everything she's doing. She's amazing with the work she's doing. She's doing behavioral endocrinology, but it's introduced me to a whole new world. And it's such a pleasure to be with bright young kids who have big dreams and to be able to help them. So part of the future is helping more people with big dreams, which is part of my dream. But there's got to be another species I can start looking at. I'm getting kind of interested in langurs all across Asia, working with people and macaques as well. So I don't know. Maybe I'll know tomorrow. That's the exciting thing about going to bed, is what's waiting the next day. Well,
there was a TEDx Osaka event in which I think you closed your talk by saying all these things. Imagine what we'll know tomorrow.
Right. Exactly.
I guess it applies to you as well.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Mike Huffman, thanks so much for joining us on the PrimateCast.
Thanks, Andrew.
You have been listening to the PrimateCast, a podcast series dedicated to the study and conservation of primates around the world. Brought to you by the Centre for International Collaboration and Advanced Studies in Primatology of the Primate Research Institute of Kyoto University. Visit us online at www.cicasp.pi.kyoto-uac.jp/news/podcasts and follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/theprimatecast and on Twitter at the PrimateCast.